The last unit we're going to be talking about in week 4's module is property trading secrets and maximizing your profits. So over to the property trading's secrets section, guys, I want to cover a few things that will help you when you go out into the real world of property trading. And whether you want to call it secrets or tips or hacks or whatever you want to call it, there's something that experience brings to the table. And some of these are very basic, but it's the secrets that I kind of go by, and it's worked wonders for my business. And we're going to be covering where the money is made, the rule of thumb for price predictions, how to ensure you never run over budget, and negotiating like your life depended on it. The first one's pretty simple, guys. Where the money is made. And the money is made when you buy. Anything on top is just a bonus. The money is also made in conversation, so you want to listen and problem solve, and you will be rewarded. And guys, it doesn't actually matter how much value you add to the property or even how much you end up selling it for. Ultimately, it comes down to buying well, so I don't want you to ever lose sight of this rule. And the money is always going to be made in the initial purchase, and I see so many traders straying away from this simple rule and overcomplicating things and thinking that their magic touch for renovations or their eye for detail will actually make their money. And I've got an answer for that. It won't. So how do we actually go out and buy well? And again, it's basically utilizing the most sought after or the most important actual sales skill, and that ends up being listening, effective listening. And you basically get rewarded when you actually help problem solve and overcome the other pain points of other people's problems. And you deserve to profit from a deal if you've actually solved someone's problems, but if you can't even do that, then you don't deserve to be rewarded. So if you haven't actually problem solved, then you're most likely not going to be getting a profitable deal. So keep that in mind, guys, and never lose sight of that very basic rule, because I see so many people foregoing this rule, and guess what? They end up losing money on the deals that they do. So where the money is made is when you buy the property. Anything on top is just an added bonus for you guys. A rule of thumb for price predictions. Always obtain 3 appraisals from 3 different real estate agents, and even better if they're different real estate agencies, and use a registered valuer if you're onto a winner. And it's definitely worth paying for it, even though if it costs $500 all the way up to $1,000, it's worth paying for it if you think you're onto a winner, because you want to be paying for certainty. And your JV money partners and even the end buyers, if you're trying to on-sell the property, everyone's going to actually appreciate that you've gone out and actually paid for a service and have a actual physical written report saying how much the property is worth and why. So you definitely want to be doing this if you think you're onto a winner. Another rule for price prediction is take $20,000 off the average price that the real estate agents come up with, or even the average from your registered valuation as well as the 3 different appraisals, and take $20,000 off that average just to be conservative. And you'll remember in one of the deals that I mentioned, we had a valuation at $485,000. It was that Rada Street property that I was talking about, and we actually ended up only selling it for $454,000. So we're about $30,000 off. And sometimes it is the case that even though you've taken $20,000 off to be conservative, you may not even reach that mark and still make a little bit less than that. But at least you're not going to lose too far out from what you've actually predicted. And I actually ended up doing a deal a long time ago where I actually didn't get 3 different appraisals, and I ended up falling short on what I thought I would earn. So this needs to be done, because trust me when I say this, guys, even real estate agents don't know what they're doing. And what you're doing when you're going out and getting 3 different appraisals as well as a registered valuation, you're actually spreading that risk. So you're not actually relying on everything based on one person's opinion. So for me, guys, there are a couple of things or a few things I do to ensure that I never actually run over budget. And it's a given that if I'm providing you guys with the budgeting tools and the structuring tools that's actually cost me money to build and figure out how to actually use, it works. It absolutely works, and it's helped me really get a clear clarification of forecasts, and it's actually been very, very accurate when I've been doing deals. So I highly encourage you guys to actually use these tools, because it means that you will never actually run over budget, or at least you'll be very close to what the numbers are predicted for you by using these tools. You also want to set an agreement with your tradies or your power team, and you want to have that pricing upfront from the very beginning. Now, I don't mean that you might have to pay upfront first before the work is done, because I never do that, and I don't advise you doing that as well. I always think that you should be paying a very small deposit to get them to do the work, but you should be paying tradies according to the milestones and according to how much work they've actually completed. So you never want to be paying a large amount up front or paying half up front, because tradies might take that payment and not prioritize your work because they've already got a whole chunk of money out of that job. So what I like to do is I actually set an agreement in place with my tradies for a number that we've decided on for the renovation, and if it actually goes over budget, it's actually their problem. And again, it's similar to what I do with money partners. If I make or lose money, it's actually their problem. And again, this basically just offsets the risk for you and ensures that you're sticking close to your budget. And that's what you'll be saying to your tradies as well, and say, look, I'm working on budget, so this is the number we're working with, and we can't go over that number. Does this work for you or not? And if they've actually agreed with it, I've had instances where certain tradies have actually ended up paying a bit more for the materials, or it ended up taking a bit longer than they expected. And had I not actually negotiated the price from the beginning, they would have actually charged me these hours. They would have billed me for these hours or charged me more for these materials. But because I've made that very clear in the beginning that this is the budget I'm working with and I can't exceed this budget, anything that goes over that budget is actually the tradies' problem. And I've had cases where the tradies are actually forking out the expenses on their behalf or from their own pockets. And lastly, one of the tips to ensure you never run over budget is just add $5,000 to your forecast just to be conservative. There's no particular reason on why this $5,000 might get spent, but who knows whether you undersell your property, or whether the jobs end up costing a little bit more, or there's something that you actually missed out on, like the cleaning cost or the staging cost. It's just an added buffer that you want to add to be conservative. And again, guys, if you are getting extra money out of the whole situation and you don't end up using the whole buffer, well, that's just more money in your back pocket. Another powerful secret for you guys is really negotiate like your life depended on it. So I've got some points here. You've reached an agreement, but you're not done yet. A phone call can potentially earn you an extra $5,000 all the way up to $25,000. Use the conditional period as leverage. And lastly, you can see a sentence that I've got there. If you don't ask, you're not going to get. And the reason why I've covered these points is because, look, in terms of buying properties, there's actually been countless occasions where I was already going to be turning a very healthy profit. For example, $30,000. But it won't actually stop me from calling the vendor or scheduling a meeting with the vendor just to go over some final details where I've been able to push the price down even further, simply by asking and explaining that the numbers don't work for me. Although 30,000 is great, the numbers still don't really work for me, and I need an additional $5,000 discounted or $10,000 discounted for me to take on the deal. And you'll be surprised, because most vendors have actually committed to selling the property anyway, and especially signing the paperwork with you in their minds, they already have an idea that they want to sell. So they're already ready for the next chapter of their life. When you revisit them and try to renegotiate the price, often the vendors are actually okay with it, as long as the price drop isn't too big, which is why I've mentioned a phone call or another meeting can actually earn you an extra $5,000 to $25,000. In the grand scheme, in terms of percentage numbers on your whole purchase price, it's not that big. And I've actually had renegotiations where, a simple phone call and meeting out to the vendor has actually earned me anywhere from an extra $5,000 all the way up to $25,000, and it is real. And this is on top of the profits on the deal that I would have already made to begin with. Of course, if the vendor isn't prepared to do this, then it'll be up to you whether you want to proceed with the deal and go ahead or not. Regardless if you're making $20,000 or $30,000, and it's just up to you whether you actually want to say, well, okay, we can't come to a further decrease in price. I'll have another chat with the team, or you know what, I'll still make these numbers work and I'll still go ahead with the deal. It was worth me asking. And they're not going to get too offended by it at all, because again, if you don't ask, you don't get. And keep in mind that the vendors on the other end do genuinely want to sell as well. Lastly, you want to use the conditional period as leverage. So using the conditional period can be used to your advantage, as often having that 15 working day period is quite long. It actually ends up being 3 weeks. Now, when I try to renegotiate, I often leave the renegotiation period up towards the end of the period of the conditional period, because in the vendor's minds, I've already gone through 2 weeks where I still haven't made a decision. And basically I've left it to the end because it kind of shows that I am working on it, I am doing the actual due diligence, but maybe there's something wrong, which is why I haven't called it unconditional. So by using this as leverage, I leave it basically to the last couple of days before my conditional period runs out, and I schedule a meeting, or I call up the vendor and I basically let them know and say, hey, look, we're very close. We've done 2.5 weeks of due diligence. We're almost there. Everything's checking out pretty spot on, and we're almost ready to go unconditional on the deal. However, after doing our numbers, the only last thing that we need to get us across the line is if you're able to work with us and work with us together to get you to where you want to be. Can you work with me to help us reduce the price further by $5,000? But by doing that, I'm able to call it unconditional today. And that's been an awesome tip that I can provide you guys, because it truly does work. And when you leave the conditional period right up to the end, it actually allows you a little bit more leverage when it comes to actually negotiating another 5 to 10 or even more off that initial purchase price. So use this and really negotiate like your life depended on it, because that phone call can potentially be worth thousands for you. So thank you guys for reaching the end of week 4's lesson. We've gone over a ton of value and a ton of information, and there's a whole bunch of things you can actually download in this week's lesson as checklists and things to go over to ensure you understand everything correctly. Now, this week's actionable steps, I want you guys to actually go out and speak to your accountant and your mortgage broker, and find one if you haven't already, and figure out your financial position and see what options work for you in terms of structuring. I also want you guys to do is complete the quiz for week 4 and don't move forward to week 5 until you've scored 100%. And again, guys, if anything hasn't made sense completely, I want you guys to revisit the sections that don't make sense and really go over it until you understand everything, so that that understanding can actually help you score 100% on the quiz. And I don't want you to be moving forward onto week 5 and week 6, because again, those week's lessons aren't going to make much sense if you don't already understand week 4 and the previous lessons as well. So thank you guys for joining me on week 4, and I know it's provided you guys a ton of value, and I look forward to seeing your success on the quiz. I look forward to seeing you on week 5's lesson next week. Thank you guys, and bye bye for now.